oh man, it's good to be back. Sorry everybody, but for those that don't know, I was on a week-long vacation, and unfortunately, I wasn't around to do my typical immediate breakdown of the Resident Evil showcase. But don't worry, I'm here now, and your boy has got you guys covered on everything you might have missed in the most recent Resident Evil Requiem trailer. That's right, it's breakdown time, so strap in nerds because it's time to dissect the hell out of this teaser trailer. Before we get started though, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more constant updates on Resident Evil Requiem, and check out the official Nerdspace game shop, which features custom-made artwork by the talented Demento Artworks. Right now we have the Chris Boulder Punching Asshole collection available, but I have a few future designs in the works that feature Leon, Wesker, and Jill, so definitely check out the store and see if anything catches your attention. Link to the shop is down in the description of today's video, but without further ado, let's jump straight into it. So yeah, the showcase starts with a small teaser trailer of mostly old footage that we've already seen at least once in previous trailers. Well, except for this one clip right here, which gives us a look at Leon entering the care center for the first time. Not much to say here, except it's worth noting that based on this scene right here, nobody is meeting with Leon at the entrance. I say this because we got that one clip from this mysterious woman last month greeting someone at the entrance of the care center. Now, assuming Leon is indeed not greeted by anybody, this means that this woman is actually greeting Grace Ashcroft, which we all kind of figured. Not a major reveal, but just something that's worth mentioning. Then right before we see the logo for the Resident Evil showcase, we get a quick glimpse at a few files, one of which is this beauty right here. Now maybe I'm crazy, but I actually don't really see too many people talking about this file, and I want to know why, because to me this is kind of important. This is interesting to me as this image alone features two unique things that catch my attention. The first is the fact that this is obviously in regards to a test subject for one of the experiments in the care center, but more importantly, we also have these words right here, which I believe say black birthmark. I mean, the handwriting is a bit rough, so I could be absolutely wrong here in true doctor stereotype fashion, of course, but assuming this does indeed say black birthmark, I'm wondering if this is in regards to maybe Grace. Maybe that's how they were able to identify Grace as the chosen one, because of the black birthmark that appears either on her neck, hand, or waist. Obviously in Grace's case, it'll have to be her waist since we have seen her hand and neck, and there doesn't appear to be any birthmark on her that's noticeable in those areas based on the trailers we've seen so far. Another article is this Elpis one that we've seen before, which if you missed in previous breakdowns, this article confirms Raccoon City has been in lockdown since the outbreak, pretty much giving Umbrella or the US government or whoever to continue the research on Elpis uninterrupted. Now, after the title card for the showcase, we get a few clips, again, most of which we've already seen, but this one right here confirms two things. One, Leon is clearly infected once again. I mean, it wouldn't be a Resident Evil game or movie featuring Leon without him getting infected at some point, now would it? But yeah, this is probably one of the best look at the infections that we've seen, and this scene specifically looks to be in the daylight, which means Leon could still be infected when he heads to Raccoon City. In a previous video of mine, I talked about how Leon will probably get cured of his infection by Grace in the care center, but this scene right here, at least to me, looks like it's daytime. If that's true, we know that Leon arrives at the care center at night, meaning that even after he leaves the care center and heads to Raccoon City, he might actually still be infected. Also, side note, remember what I said about the black birthmark? Well, it's interesting that Leon is actually infected on the neck with Elpis, one of the three areas shown on that file we saw earlier. I don't know if it's just a coincidence, but it was something that caught my attention a bit. Maybe it has something to do with Elpis infecting you in those areas, or at least showing in those areas first, I don't know. Or maybe Leon has been infected with Elpis long before Requiem, and this game just causes it to break out and lose control. Yeah, I really don't know, guys, that's kind of a stretch, but I am interested in the fact that this mark is also located in one of the three spots mentioned in that document at the start of the showcase. Okay, so now we do jump over to Leon gameplay, but before I talk about that, I think it's worth mentioning that there's a few segments in this montage that I won't be breaking down because, well, it's pre-alpha footage, and Capcom even confirmed at the top right hand corner of the screen that these scenes are not in the game, but rather unused assets in the final game. So yeah, don't expect to see any of these scenes that they're showing right now that's playing on my screen right now. Those are not in the game, guys. Now, one thing I want to point out, once Capcom decides to move on past the pre-alpha footage and onto actual gameplay featured in, well, the game, is how we get to see some differences in Grace and Leon's gameplay, and the fact that only Leon appears to have a melee weapon. Obviously, we'll see him using this to parry, stealth kill enemies, and everything we saw from him in Resident Evil 4 Remake, but this time with the Tomahawk. Grace, however, appears to not have any sort of melee weapons like he does, or at least not in terms of like having a weapon that can do all these sorts of different action horde type of mechanics. I say that because later in the trailer we see Grace with like a knife that she's able to use as like a counter item, but I don't think we get like parry systems with Grace or anything like that. Basically, this solidifies exactly what Capcom has been telling us for ever since Leon's been revealed, honestly, that Leon will be the action horror gameplay side of the game like Resident Evil 4, and Grace will be the survival horror gameplay side of the game like RE2 and Resident Evil 7. Also, while demonstrating some of Leon's melee abilities, there's one scene of him kicking a zombie into a breakable box, and I just want to say for all of you yellow paint haters out there, it looks like you won't have that in this game, so there's a W for you guys. At least for the breakable boxes, that is. Something that I really love about Leon's melee attacks this time around is how they interact with the environment. For example, if you kick an enemy into the wall while they are prone and on their knees from being shot, Leon will literally smash their head against the wall. Moving on, there's a few other missable things. First off, there's this antique coin on the right hand side of the screen on the piano, which basically confirms that these coins are back from Resident Evil 7. For those that don't know, these coins were collectible items found throughout Resident Evil 7 that could then be used to purchase different resources, from keys that create shortcuts to a magnum even. Also, the same scene showcases Leon's ability to stealth kill enemies with his new tomahawk, and man, he is a show off. Seriously, dude walks up to him, does a Superman hero pose after cutting off the zombie's head, and then somehow does not get noticed by the zombie standing right next to them. Legend, that's all I'm gonna say about that. Another interesting thing I want to point out about this scene is the fact that this looks like it takes place in the Renwood Hotel. Why is this important? Well, up until this point, I always thought Leon goes to Renwood Hotel first. Then, for whatever reason, he heads over to the care center. However, we see Leon at the care center with his jacket on, but then we see him without his jacket back at Renwood Hotel in this same scene, or at least I assume this is Renwood Hotel. I mean, how many care centers would literally have a bar in the building? Just saying. So yeah, unless this is the player in the trailer choosing to try on a different costume at this exact moment, it looks like Leon will return to Renwood Hotel after he goes to the care center. Whether that's because the player can revisit it, sort of like a semi-open world situation, or something in the story sends him back here. Whatever the case is, it looks like he does revisit it after the care center, which I think is very interesting to point out. Moving on, after the stealth kill, we get a quick look at two important details that you might have missed if you didn't look hard enough. First off, we get another look at the quick shot mechanic, but this time with a shotgun. The quick shot mechanic was one of the few interesting gameplay mechanics of Resident Evil 6, and it was arguably one of the most satisfying combat features of RE6, not gonna lie. It was extremely addicting. Now, we saw a brief tease of this with the Leon trailer last month at the Game Awards, in which he does a quick shot with his handgun, but this sequence here confirms that at least with Leon, you'll be able to do it with just about any gun in the game. Love that this mechanic is back, by the way, although I hope it sticks with just Leon, as I don't think this mechanic works well with horror in my opinion, therefore it definitely should not be featured in Grace's section of the game. The second thing I want to point out is this shotgun. At first glance, I thought it was the same shotgun in Resident Evil 2 Remake, the W870 I think it's called, but on closer examination, it looks more like the sawed-off version of the shotgun that appears in Ada's Separate Ways campaign of Resident Evil 4 Remake. Don't know if this is just an Easter egg for her, or if it's something more, but either way, definitely a cool little hidden detail that you probably won't catch right away unless you look very closely. Fast forwarding to this section of the video that talks about a new breed of infected, we get a really interesting detail confirmed by Nakanishi. As it turns out, the zombies in this game are unlike any zombies in other Resident Evil games. Now, this is something that we already kind of figured based on how one zombie was able to wield a chainsaw and talk briefly in the last trailer, but hearing that the infected individuals still have some sort of themselves adds a unique flair to the zombie genre in my opinion. Like seeing creepy ass zombies still trying to do things and activities that they remember from their everyday life adds some sort of unique tension and creepiness to the infected this time around that we haven't seen much in previous games. Not a hidden detail, but just something that I really want to say that I love before moving on. Next up, there's some focus on some gameplay elements featuring both Grace and Leon. For Leon, as I mentioned earlier, we see that the enemies interact more with the environment this time around. This scene here of the chainsaw zombie knocking over objects as he swings it around just really excites me for some reason. Also, we get another look at the quick shot ability with Leon's handgun. We also get confirmation of the parry system using Leon's tomahawk, including the fact that it would be able to be used to parry a chainsaw again. Not very realistic, but a feature that I'm still very happy to see return again for Leon's section portion of the game. Something that I do kind of feel a little bit weird about is that Leon has to sharpen his tomahawk now, I guess. I really don't know how I feel about it, but I guess it prevents the player from relying too much on the tomahawk, similar to Resident Evil 4 Remake, but instead of outright destroying it and fixing it each time with the merchant, you have to sharpen it before you can use it again. The trailer doesn't really go too much into detail about this sharpening mechanic, but I imagine you'll have to find some sort of resource, like a welding stone, to sharpen the tomahawk, and it's not something that you can just use as often as you want. Otherwise, this tomahawk could prove to be extremely overpowered, just saying. Oh, and on top of the quick shot mechanic, it looks like there's also a counter command as well. Well, I assume there is because at one point Leon dodges a chainsaw zombie and instantly kills him by shooting him in the back of the head after dodging him. The way it actually played out kind of reminded me of a QTE counter, but I didn't see a QTE on the screen anywhere, at least in this sequence that played out, so I'm curious as to how this will be handled in the game. In terms of the chainsaw, as expected when we saw the last trailer, Leon can pick up melee weapons from zombies like chainsaws and use them for himself. Now, I'm sure there will be a limit of how much Leon can use this weapon before it breaks, but in this sequence here, nothing seems to happen with the status of the chainsaw, so not sure what's that about, honestly. Still, I highly doubt that we'll be able to run around with the chainsaw throughout the entire game, obviously. Moving over to Grace, there's a few more clips of Grace's gameplay showcasing how it'll focus on the horror side of things while also teasing never before seen areas, including a dining room full of zombies feeding on some random shit. But after this montage, we finally get the name of the badass looking Magnum that both Grace and Leon used throughout the game. And yeah, if you didn't think that this gun would play a major part in the story already, I'm sure you do now, considering the fact that the gun is literally named the Requiem. Yeah, as in the same name of Resident Evil 9 itself. Clearly, this gun is going to be an extremely important part of the game, but Nakanishi remains vague as hell about what part this gun will play in the plot of Resident Evil 9. I covered this in a previous video of mine, but I already think that this gun will have a similar premise as the Albert 01 from Resident Evil 7, a gun that was tailor-made to fire BOW rounds meant to destroy the mold. I think this gun is similar to that gun, but instead it's made with the purpose of destroying the Elvis virus. Now, taking a look at the gun, there's a few things that I want to mention. Prior to the showcase, we got this image of the Requiem alongside red bullets. Now, when I first saw this, I immediately thought, okay, this is probably the ammunition that was made to be extremely effective against Elvis virus infected individuals. Then in the teaser, we see Grace reloading it, and this time the bullets look kind of purple. So I'm wondering if there's different types of rounds used with this gun. Anyways, Grace also used some sort of device to reload the gun, as if touching the bullets with her hand directly would have some sort of horrifying side effect. Regardless, this gun is very, very powerful, as there's examples of it clearing out a row of zombies with a single shot in the trailer. Now, at first I noticed that the zombies killed by Grace with the revolver appeared to drop something on the floor. My immediate thought was that you could pick up the empty shell from the gun, reload it with something, and then use it as a bullet again. But a few scenes later, we get an idea of what exactly is left behind, as Nakanishi confirmed that you can actually collect blood from zombies in this game as a resource. And this blood is apparently used to craft bullets and other resources. In the trailer, we see that at the very least, you can craft handgun bullets with the blood, as well as some sort of injector, which straight up is badass, as it pretty much instantly blows up a zombie the moment you inject it with this drug. So in regards to this injector, by the way, while I'm on the topic of this, something I think is really cool is the fact that the drug actually specifically says that it prevents corpses from mutating, and that honestly sounds really awesome, because I think, and I could be wrong here, but I think this this injector could hint towards the possibility of Crimson Heads or something similar to Crimson Heads, because if you're trying to prevent corpses from mutating, I instantly think of, well, Crimson Heads in Resident Evil Remake that are zombies that you killed earlier in the game mutating into, well, more dangerous zombies. So this is actually really cool. This might be a soft confirmation of Crimson Heads or something similar to Crimson Heads, which I think is absolutely awesome. One small detail that I like in regards to the change of perspectives in Resident Evil Requiem is that you can actually go into the settings and make it to where all of Leon's gameplay sections are one way and all of Grace's sections are another way. For example, I'm leaning towards playing Leon in third person and Grace in first person for my first playthrough. I originally thought that this was going to be something that I would have to change back and forth each time I switch protagonists, but thankfully it looks like you can just actually set both Leon's and Grace's sections to the perspective you want individually and not have to worry about switching back and forth between perspectives when you switch characters. I know it's a pretty minor feature, but something that I really appreciate and allows us to stay immersed in the game without having to change the settings each time we switch protagonists. On the note of settings, Capcom confirmed the difficulties available at launch. You have casual, standard modern, and standard classic. Obviously, I'll be playing on standard classic as it'll feature the return of ink ribbons with limited saves, at least with Grace. Leon apparently will still use autosaves, which honestly I'm kind of disappointed with, but I totally get it. I mean, Leon is action horror and Grace is survival horror, so it kind of makes sense for Grace to have limited saving, but not Leon sections of the game. I'm also a little disappointed that there's not a hardcore or professional mode available at launch, as I'm someone that loves playing on the hardest difficulty right away, but I'm sure once you beat the game on standard, you'll unlock hardcore or a mode similar to Village of Shadows or Madhouse mode featured in Resident Evil 7 and Village. Personally, I'm hoping for something more similar to Madhouse mode, as the mode change up some of the enemy locations, key item locations, and even the puzzles compared to Village of Shadows, which was essentially just the same game but on a much harder difficulty. On the note of Grace's sections of the game, it looks like she'll have access to an inventory box. We can see it briefly when we're being shown the typewriter, but unfortunately my gut is telling me that this is something that will only be available to Grace's sections of the game, like the typewriter is, since her areas in the game focuses more on survival horror. I don't think this is confirmed anywhere, but I'm just assuming this. Since Leon is focused on action horror, he'll probably have more space in his inventory and probably won't need an inventory box to help manage his resources like Grace will. Either way, I'm just happy to see inventory boxes returning again, as Resident Evil Village decided to move away from it, and straight up I was pretty disappointed about that decision. The next section of the showcase focuses on collaborations and a bunch of merchandise being sold alongside Resident Evil Requiem. Now, I'm just gonna skip over all of this because quite honestly, none of this is for me. Plus, none of it really has anything to do with the plot of Resident Evil Requiem or Easter eggs or anything like that, so there's really no point in talking about it. Instead, I want to skip to the end of the showcase, in which we get a final montage of different scenes in the game. First is when Nakanishi is talking about Elpis and how it's connected to Leon. There's not much here specifically in terms of Elpis, but I did find it interesting how Leon reacts to seeing Grace's file in regards to Elpis on the computer. Now, I've said this in previous breakdowns of mine, but I believe Grace is a test tube baby adopted by Alyssa and not her biological daughter. Instead, I believe the DSO, including Leon, found Grace when raiding an Umbrella lab somewhere and realized she was the only survivor out of a bunch of experiments conducted on different people. In fact, I think it's possible that Grace could be a clone, and out of all the clones or test subjects, Grace was the only one to bond successfully with Elpis. However, Leon and the DSO raided the lab, found Grace, and hid her from Gideon and the company he works for by giving her a fake identity as Alyssa's daughter. Now, since Leon hasn't seen Grace since she was a kid, he didn't recognize her right away. However, when looking at the files, he sees who Grace really is and ultimately realizes why Gideon is after her, hence his reaction to seeing her file on the computer. That's my whole thought process on this scene. Now, something else does happen that kind of confirms my whole theory in regards to all of this actually. During the montage of scenes at the end of the showcase, Grace asks Gideon why did he kidnap her, and his answer is, well, his answer is kind of interesting.
Why did you kidnap me?
Kidnap you? I liberated you.
Liberated is definitely an interesting word choice here, as Gideon, for whatever reason, believes that he freed Grace by taking her. My thought process behind this is that the DSO have been hiding Grace and protecting her all of this time, keeping her hidden from Gideon and the company he works for. So when Gideon says he liberated her, he means he freed her from the prison that the DSO had her in, metaphorical of course. The last and final shot is our first look at a new monster outside of the Hag and the Elpis zombies, and, well, it's something, alright. Definitely giving us giant fetus vibes here from Resident Evil Village, not gonna lie. Now, I've tried to examine a few things on this creature to get an idea if this is just a completely deformed monster that is of no importance, or if it connects to anything we've seen so far in the trailers. The first thing that I noticed is that the eyes appear to be similar to the Hag's eyes, at least to some extent. In fact, the way that these eyes look, I'm kind of wondering if this creature is blind, just like the Hag. Also, 3 other things stick out to me on top of this, all of which point towards this monster being Victor Gideon in some sort of mutated form. 1, his voice and what he says.
Grace!
Obviously, trying to compare a mutated monster's voice to Gideon's voice is not going to go over well, but for some reason, I can honestly picture this monster's voice being exactly what Gideon would sound like if he mutated into this monster. Plus, he does say, "I won't forgive you" to Grace, which straight up can connect to something Grace does that ultimately ends in Victor Gideon becoming this monster. I mean, I did say that I don't think Gideon is the main villain of the game, so seeing him as a creature in the care center isn't too far out of the realm of possibilities. Finally, the way that this creature looks really really gives me Gideon mutated vibes. The forehead kind of resembles Gideon's forehead, if you remove the headgear, of course. The nose, again, kind of resembles Gideon's after his nostrils just went inwards due to his mutation. And even the ripped jacket on the creature kind of reminds me of Gideon due to him wearing a jacket. Yeah, I'm really feeling like this will be a mutated Victor Gideon, which again is something I predicted earlier this month, as I guess we would see a mutated Victor Gideon at the showcase, and honestly, it looks like we might have. Other possibilities, well, there's really only one that comes to mind. Looking back at the similarities that this creature has to the hack, I'm wondering if this is just another one of the failed experiments by Gideon in his pursuit to recreate the same results that Grace had when she bonded with Elpis. Like, I believe the hack could be one of these experiments, and maybe this giant creature is another failed experiment. I don't know, personally, I like the Gideon theory, and I think a lot of people are kind of leaning that way too based on everything we saw in the short teaser trailer. But that's all for my breakdown of the most recent Resident Evil Requiem trailer. As always, I'll be working on future theory videos and other videos in regards to Resident Evil Requiem leading up to its release next month, so be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. But I do want to hear your opinions. Let me know some of your opinions in the comments down below. Did you like the showcase, or were you disappointed? Do you think this monster is Victor Gideon? And what other hidden details did you notice in the showcase that I completely missed? Let me know all of your thoughts down below. But thanks for watching, everybody, and I'll catch you guys on the next episode of Nerd Space Games. Take care.